Okay, this is the last tutorial on gathering that I'm going to do, and this is just 2 straight stitches, and they're basting stitches. So you want your stitch length to be as long as you can get it, and then you also want to do 2 rows of stitches, so that way you have an even gather and it holds better. But not only that, it will, if you break one thread, then it's not going to make that much of a difference because you'll still have that other one to fall back on. So you do not want to back stitch on this. You just want to do a baste all the way around, and you want to make it even. So I'm just going to stitch the first one, and this is stitching in the round. And I am about halfway around. I know it's not perfectly even. I'm doing this quickly so you guys can see. This is not my favorite way because it is a little more time consuming. Okay, so when I get here, I could easily just stop right about there where I started and then start a new line. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get my threads off to the side so I don't stitch over them, and then I'm just going to hop right across here and start stitching my new line right next to it. So when I do that, I use my foot as a reference. So you can see, let me straighten this out a little bit. You can see that my foot is my reference. I'm just going on with my stitch on the outside, and it really doesn't matter how far apart you make your stitches. They just need to be uniform all the way around so you get a nice even gather. So you can see here, that's about how far my stitches are apart. It just needs to be uniform. That's the big key. And depending on what you're gathering, if you do wider apart, if you have a thicker fabric, like a cotton woven that's a little bit thicker, a wider gather is a lot easier. For this is bamboo, so it's really thin and drapey, so having them closer together, it actually works pretty well. Uh-oh, something's going on. I'm not exactly sure what my machine's goofing up. That's okay though, it's just gathering for me, see? I'll take it. Probably just need to clean it. You know, that's kind of important. So I'm getting close to the end. Now you can see where I crossed over. I want to stop just before I get to that crossover section. Okay, and again, I am not back stitching at all. I'm just going to lift up my needle and then pull it out, and I want a good tail. Okay. So here I have my tails, and I'm going to actually work on the green side so you can see what I'm doing. My needle side has my green thread. So there's a couple different ways that I can do this. I can simply just pull these green threads and gather both ways, or I can pick up one of these little threads right here, which is actually what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to pull that with my green one. So if I do that, I actually want to make sure this one doesn't come undone. So I'm going to pull my bobbin thread out from the bottom. You can do this if you don't have nails with a seam ripper, just pull it out like that. And then you want to tie it off so it doesn't come unraveled while you're gathering. Okay, that is tied. Okay, and now I have my little loop that I pulled up right here, and I have my running thread. And so I'm gonna pull those together. If I can get it untwisted. Come on, thread. There we go. Okay. So I pulled that one up a little bit. I'm gonna pull that one to catch up. And now all I'm gonna do is I'm just going to pull this around. Now, when I'm gathering like this, you want to pull both threads evenly. If you don't, it'll turn out a little bit wonky and it might get to the point where you can't pull it or it gets hard. The other thing is when you pull it evenly, you get these nice even gathers all the way around. So actually, if you're sewing something that the fabric is a little more slippery or tricky, it's better to do this method because these stay in place better, and it also creates a flat surface to sew on. So while you're feeding it through your sewing machine, that gives you a nice flat surface that's not going to go anywhere. You have this extra fabric on top because you have that little edge. It gives you more surface area to really have more control in what you're doing. So this is just, I like doing this method. It's just more time consuming than using my serger. So usually I do my serger because it gets a good gather and it's really fast. This takes longer, but it also gets a good gather. So just depending on what I'm doing. Lots of tools to put in your toolbox for gathering. So let's go all the way around. Found a tight spot. So that's the other thing with this method is you might find a tight spot, and if you pull too hard, your thread could break. If your thread breaks, then you still have one thread that's not broken. If you break the second thread, then you're just in trouble and you have to do it all over again. That's one of the reasons I don't like this method as well, is because it's easier to break your threads. I always use serger thread when I'm sewing with my regular machine. Just what I've always done. That's how my mom taught me to sew. Just use serger cone thread for everything, and it breaks a lot easier. And so maybe I should probably invest in actual thread for my machine. I don't use my regular sewing machine enough to, I don't know, I guess I could, but I use my serger a lot more. Okay, so I'm going all the way around. Getting closer to the end. And just little bits at a time. Especially if you don't trust your thread, just little bits at a time. Otherwise you probably will break something. And then you'll have to go through and do it all over again, which is a pain in the neck. But it's not impossible, it just takes even longer because then you have to do the process again. Okay, yeah, there is a rough spot there. Okay, but when I pull more fabric, it seems to come. Alright. So another good thing about using this method versus the serger method is that you can get tighter gathers. So you can see how that actually gathers down really low. If I tried to do this with my serger, my gathers would probably be twice as long because the stitch length can only go so much, and then you don't have this extra fabric on top and just the way it is. So being able to do that wider distance between the two stitches allows the gathers to come together more closely as well. So there's that. Now what I want to do is I want to actually measure it to my bodice that this is going on. I'm making the bloomin' breeches here. There's my bodice, and that is way too small, so I want to stretch it out a bit. Okay, get it to where I want it, and then tie it off. I'm going to do this kind of sloppy because I'll probably pull this out anyways, because it's not, my edges aren't as straight as I like them. which is fine. That's me being picky. Okay, so now what I do is I have it the length that I want it. I'm going to go around and I'm going to even out my stitches. Now, since we're comparing the different methods, to get this to go evenly, just like I did with the serger one, you can pull it to see where your gathers are, and then you can kind of dress them around where you want them to be. With this, it's not hard to get them where you want them. You could also do a third stitch line if you really want your gathers to stay even and not move around at all. That helps a lot. But for just basic things, then 2 stitch lines are perfectly acceptable. So there is about even, and it produces about the same even gathers as doing it the method that I showed you guys with the serger. The only difference is you have to really make sure that your stitches are the same distance from the edge of your dress, otherwise you're going to end up with a wonky dress. The other thing is that if you don't go over these stitch lines when you're stitching the bodice to the dress bottom, you can easily just pull these out. All you have to do is snip one end and then pull the thread and it comes out, and you don't have those extra stitches. You might have stitch holes, but you won't have stitches. So there's that too. So there's benefits and disadvantages to both methods, but there you go. There's that method as well.